My daughter looked me straight in the eyes and repeated her husband's words as if they were gospel. Either you follow what Troy says, or you two need to find somewhere else to live. The sentence hit me harder than any doctor's diagnosis I've ever received. It was spoken in our own kitchen, under the very lights I installed last winter, when they said the old bulbs were too dim for modern living. My wife Eileen froze mid-step, still holding the dish towel she'd been folding. I saw her shoulders tighten before her face did. Marissa wouldn't look directly at us. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, like she hoped the neighbor's dog would bark and spare her from finishing the ultimatum. I felt a heat crawl up my neck, the kind that comes when someone much younger forgets the decades you carried them. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands were trembling on the table. So it's his demands or our departure? I asked. Troy wasn't even in the room. He stayed in the living room, pretending to scroll his phone, as if he hadn't just turned our lives into a negotiation. The refrigerator hummed loudly in the silence, a reminder that everything in this house still had our fingerprints on it. Eileen took a small breath, the kind I recognized from years of marriage, the breath she takes right before choosing dignity over emotion. Before answering, I leaned back and spoke softly. You know, I tell stories now, old man stories, and every time I do, I say this. Subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments how old you are and where you're from. For you, it's just a small thing, but for me, it's the reason I keep telling these stories. I said it not as a plea, but as a reminder that I've lived long enough to know when a chapter is ending. Then I stood up, pushing my chair back until its legs scraped the tile. If these are the conditions, I said, we won't stay where we're not respected. Eileen nodded gently, without a single tear, which somehow made it hurt even more. Marissa opened her mouth like she wanted to take it back, but nothing came out. And silence, when it comes from your own child, can feel like the sharpest cut of all. We went upstairs to pack without another word, the house suddenly too quiet for a place once filled with our grandchildren's laughter. That night, when we left, I thought the hardest part was over, but 10 days later, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop, and on the screen were 17 missed calls, all from the daughter who had let us walk away. Eileen and I packed slower than we used to, not because of age, but because every drawer held a memory we didn't expect to leave behind. I folded my shirts to needle out of stubbornness, I guess, while Eileen kept muttering that she couldn't find her good sewing scissors. Maybe Troy hid them so we wouldn't stitch our way back into their lives. I joked, and she almost smiled, though her eyes stayed wet. I tried to lighten the mood again by sitting on the edge of the bed to tie my shoes, only to realize I'd put on 2 completely different socks. Eileen stared at me, raised one eyebrow, and said, well, at least you're leaving them with a fashion statement. It wasn't much, but it was just enough humor to keep my heart from cracking in half. As we packed, I kept glancing at the family photos on the wall, the one where Marissa was 10, and insisted I hold her teddy bear during the picture. The one where Troy first joined a holiday dinner and tried to carve the turkey like it was a medical emergency. I remembered laughing then. Now, every frame felt like a witness to our eviction. Eileen brushed her hand across a photo of the grandkids, and I heard her whisper, they won't even understand why we're gone. I didn't answer, because the truth was too heavy. Neither did I. When we finally carried our suitcases downstairs, Marissa stood by the counter, wringing her hands like she expected us to yell or curse or break something. Instead, I walked past her quietly, gripping the rails tighter than I should have. Dad, you're really leaving? She asked, voice trembling, but her feet stayed planted. I turned just enough to look at her. You asked us to, I said. We're doing what you wanted. Outside, the evening breeze felt colder than usual. I struggled with a suitcase latch until Eileen gently pushed my hands away and fixed it. She's always been better at the small things that matter. As we drove off, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. It didn't look like home anymore. It looked like a place where we had overstayed a welcome that no longer existed. All night, I kept waiting for regret to hit me like a storm. Instead, what came was something stranger. A quiet, steady resolve. I realized that sometimes dignity whispers louder than anger ever could. Still, a part of me wondered what would happen Once the silence inside that house finally settled and what cracks it might reveal between Marissa and Troy. I just didn't expect those cracks to widen so fast, or for our phone to become the center of the storm barely a week later. The first few days after we left were strangely quiet, almost peaceful in a way that made me suspicious. Eileen and I rented a small room above an old florist's chapon, of those places where everything smells faintly of lavender and wet cardboard. The owner, a tiny woman named Harriet, kept insisting I take any wilted bouquet for free. "It'll brighten your mood," she said. I didn't have the heart to tell her that half of them looked like they'd been through a divorce of their own. Still, I took them. Eileen rolled her eyes and asked how many dying plants I planned to adopt. "All of them," I said. "We're building a retirement jungle." We tried settling into a routine. I made morning coffee but kept forgetting where Harriet stored the filters. So every day I improvised, once with a paper napkin, once with a sock that I swear was clean, and once with absolutely nothing, which Eileen called cowboy sludge. She took one sip, gagged dramatically, and told me I was no longer allowed to experiment without adult supervision. For the first time since the ultimatum, we really laughed until the sound echoed up the narrow staircase. But beneath the humor, a slow ache kept pressing on my ribs. I couldn't shake the image of Marissa standing in that kitchen, torn between us and her husband, or the way her voice had trembled even as she delivered his message. I'd raised her to speak her own mind. Now it felt like she'd rented it out to Troy for a discount price. Eileen pretended not to worry, but every time her phone lit up, she'd jump a little, as if hoping it was one of the grandkids. It never was. I told myself she'd adjust, but she kept knitting the same row of her scarf, over and over again, a sure sign her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Meanwhile, I tried to play the role of the steady oak, but even oaks crack when pulled from their soil. By the fifth night, the air in our little room felt too still, like something was building just out of sight. I didn't know whether it would be guilt, anger, or consequences, but I knew something was moving toward us, slow and heavy, like a train on old tracks. And when the first message finally arrived, it wasn't from Marissa, but from someone who had never contacted me directly before. The message came late in the evening, just as I was trying to convince a stubborn radiator to produce at least 1 degree of warmth. I smacked the side of it with my palm gently, like a man negotiating with an old friend when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I had never expected to see there. Troy. Not Marissa, not one of the kids. Him. For a moment, I thought my phone was malfunctioning. That radiator gave off more heat than Troy ever gave off courtesy. I opened the message. It was short, nervous, and uncharacteristically polite. "Call me when you can." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no hint of why a man who couldn't say thank you when I paid for their car repair would suddenly need my attention. I stared at it so long, Eileen asked if I was reading the terms and conditions of a new toaster. Before replying, I tried to distract myself by helping Harriet downstairs unload her shipment of roses. Bad idea. The very first box I picked up ripped open, spilling petals everywhere like a dramatic wedding scene gone wrong. Harriet gasped. I panicked and tried to catch them mid-air, swatting at the petals like an overgrown butterfly. Eileen just stood at the top of the stairs watching me, with that expression that says, "I married a man who loses fistfights with flowers." We cleaned it up for half an hour. Still, the message from Troy pulsed in my mind the entire time. Later, in our room, I sat on the edge of the bed holding my phone. "Should I call him back?" I asked. Eileen didn't answer right away. Instead, she set down her knitting and looked at me as if weighing the last 20 years of our family's choices. "If he's reaching out," she finally said, "something's wrong. But whether you answer or not, that's your decision." I sighed, rubbing my forehead. I hated that I cared. I hated that, despite everything, part of me still saw Troy as someone I had once hoped would be a partner to my daughter, not a man who issued ultimatums from the safety of another room. But the message kept tugging at me, like a loose thread on a sweater you know better than to pull. I didn't call him that night. I needed time, and maybe, just maybe, I needed him to feel that silence for once. But at dawn, when my phone buzzed again louder, longer, More urgent, I knew it wasn't a man's patience reaching its end. It was his fear. By sunrise, my phone sounded like it was trying to escape my pocket. 3 messages, then another, then a call, then another one, all from Troy. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I wanted revenge, though I won't lie. A small part of me enjoyed imagining him pacing around, sweating through his fancy t-shirts, but because I wanted to hear his tone before showing my hand. Finally, I put the phone on speaker, placed it on the nightstand, and let it ring. Eileen crossed her arms, waiting, like a woman about to watch a courtroom drama where she already knows the verdict. When it rang the 7th time, I picked up. He sounded shattered. "Sir, Mr. Halston, you please just talk to me?" I almost dropped the phone. Troy had never called me sir. He barely called me anything. Last time he addressed me directly, it was to ask if I could maybe not rearrange the spice cabinet, as if cumin placement was a threat to national security. I kept my voice calm, though my heart was pounding a little. "Troy, what's happening?" He stammered through his words like a man trying to explain a fire he started while making toast. "It's Marissa. I think I don't know, she's upset about something. She won't talk to me. She keeps asking for you and Eileen. And she's not okay. Can you please come talk to her? Or at least call her back? Please?" Eileen's eyebrows shot so high, they nearly left her forehead. I muted the call for a moment. "Well," she whispered, "isn't this fascinating? The king of the castle suddenly needs his exiled citizens." I couldn't help it, I laughed, even though the situation felt heavier than my old toolbox. "Should we rush over like loyal subjects?" "Only if you wear matching socks this time," she said, eyeing my feet. I looked down. I had mismatched them again. Perfect. I unmuted the phone. "Troy, if she needs us, she can call." "She has been calling," he blurted. "Both of you. The kids miss you, she misses you. Everything's falling apart here, and 2 didn't know what to do." His voice cracked at the end. Not a dramatic crack. A real one. The kind a man can't control. And hearing it, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something older and sadder. When the call finally ended, I set the phone down. Eileen sat beside me, her fingers brushing my arm. "She asked for us," she said softly. "Not him. Us." And for the first time since we left that house, my chest tightened in a way that wasn't pain, more like a door unlocking. But this was the moment the story changed hands, not because I wanted it to, but because the truth of what happened next belongs to my wife.
When Troy's trembling voice faded from the speaker, I sat still for a long moment, listening to the radiator clank like it was also giving its opinion. My husband kept pacing, muttering to himself about kids these days, swinging his arms the way he does when he's pretending not to be worried. I watched him for a bite, nearly tripped over the bouquet of drooping carnations Harriet gave him. He caught himself on the dresser, then tried to look dignified, which only made me laugh. "You all right, Mr. Jungle Gardener?" I asked. He grumbled something about the floor being uneven. The floor was perfectly fine. Inside, though, I felt something tightening, something I had been trying to smother since the night we walked out of our daughter's house. A mother can hold a grudge, yes, but she can also hear a child's fear, even through another person's voice. And Troy was frightened. Not frightened like a boy who broke a vase. Frightened like a man who finally realized he wasn't the center of the universe. I picked up my phone. 15 missed calls from Marissa, 2 from the kids. My heart sank into a place only mothers know, a place of worry, guilt, anger, instinct, and love, tangled so tightly they're impossible to separate. "We should have called sooner," I whispered, though I hated admitting it. My husband looked at me like I'd confessed to stealing a car. "We were giving them space," he said. "They told us to go." "Yes," I said, "but they didn't say they stopped needing us." I grabbed my coat, then realized I'd put it on inside out. He smirked. "Nice fashion choice." "Oh, hush," I snapped playfully, flipping it around. "Not all of us are trendsetters with mismatched socks." "Those socks are artistic expression," he declared, lifting his chin proudly. "Those socks are why I fear for you in the wild," I replied. We sat on the bed together, trying to decide whether to go immediately or wait for Marissa's next call. I kept twisting my wedding ring, an old nervous habit that had worn the gold thin over the years. I remembered brushing Marissa's hair when she was little, how she'd cling to my sleeve whenever she felt unsure. I remembered her crying in my lap after her first heartbreak. And now she was somewhere in that house, calling and calling, and we weren't there. The weight of that nearly crushed me. Then, as if the universe wanted to stop my thinking and start my acting, my phone lit up again. Marissa. No hesitation, no second guessing, just her name glowing across the screen like a flare fired into a dark sky. I answered. And the sound of her voice on the other end made my heart twist in a way I hadn't felt since the day she was born. Mom, please come. Those were the first words out of her mouth. Not hello, not an explanation, just that trembling whisper, thin as tissue paper. For a moment I couldn't answer. My breath caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. She sounded like a child again, the way she used to when thunderstorms rattled her bedroom windows. But this wasn't weather. This was something much darker. I'm here, sweetheart, I said, trying to steady my voice. My husband leaned closer, pretending not to eavesdrop, even though his ear was practically touching my cheek. I nudged him away. He pretended to stumble dramatically off the bed, nearly knocking over a vase of Harriet's half-dead chrysanthemums. When he grabbed the vase mid-fall, water sloshed everywhere, including onto his socks, which he still insisted were artistically mismatched. I almost laughed, even with panic clawing at my chest. Marissa's breathing was uneven. Mom, things are bad. I can't talk long. Can you and Dad come? Today? Now? Her voice cracked on the last word. My heart clenched. Are the kids okay? They're with me, she whispered. But Dad needs to talk to Troy. And I just need you both. I closed my eyes and felt tears slip out, quiet ones. The kind that come when a mother realizes her child finally sees the consequences of the life she built. My husband straightened his posture instantly when he saw my face. We're going, I said firmly. He nodded and started grabbing jackets, shoes, keys, and for some reason, a roll of paper towels. In case of emotional emergencies, he explained. I didn't question it. After all, this man once brought pliers to a parent-teacher conference because he thought things might get practical. As we hurried down the narrow, floral-scented staircase, I rehearsed every possible disaster in my mind. Had they fought? Had someone said something unforgivable? Was Troy unraveling? Or had Marissa finally seen the cracks we'd been politely ignoring for years? We reached the car, and my husband fumbled with the keys, like a man trying to defuse a bomb. The alarm beeped twice, then 3 times, then once again. Is it talking to us? He muttered. It's saying drive the car, I snapped, pushing the key into his hand. You're just not listening. Once the engine started, everything became too real. My fingers trembled in my lap. He reached over and squeezed my hand, the way he always does when my thoughts start spiraling. We'll figure it out, he whispered. We always do. But as we pulled out of the parking lot, my phone vibrated again. Another call, this time not from Marissa. It was from our oldest grandchild, and his shaking little voice would reveal something neither of us ever expected to hear. The moment I answered our grandson's call, I could hear him sniffing, trying not to let his voice shake. Grandma. Mommy's crying, he whispered, barely audible over the sound of a slammed door somewhere behind him. My husband tightened his grip on the steering wheel so hard I worried he'd leave fingerprints embedded in it. Is everyone safe? I asked gently. Yes, but Grandpa needs to hurry. Mom said not to open our bedroom door. She said to stay with her. She's scared, Grandma. Scared. My daughter. That word hit harder than the ultimatum ever did. I motioned to my husband to drive faster. He understood immediately, though his version of faster was hitting the gas so abruptly that my head snapped back and the glove compartment flew open, spilling an avalanche of tissues, coupons, and a mysterious screwdriver. Why is this even here? I yelped, grabbing the dashboard. Emergency repairs, he said proudly, as if this explained anything. What emergency repairs require a screwdriver in the glove box, Harold? The emotional kind, he muttered. If I weren't terrified, I'd have laughed. Our grandson's quiet breathing trembled through the speaker. Grandma, Mommy said Grandpa shouldn't be mad at her. She said she made a mistake. My husband looked at me, confusion and heartbreak twisting together on his face. I could see it happening in real time. The moment a parent realizes their child isn't just hurting, they've finally reached the point where their pride has cracked wide open. Sweetheart, I told our grandson, stay with your mother. Keep the door closed. We're almost there. Okay, Grandma, hurry. Then he hung up. Silence filled the car, except for the rattle of the old engine and my husband muttering something under his breath about how he should have changed the oil last month. He always mutters when he's scared. It's his way of pretending he's still in control. The truth is, he cared more deeply than any man I've ever known, but he hid it behind jokes, mismatched socks, and an exaggerated grumble. As we turned onto Marissa's street, my stomach tightened. Her house looked the same from the outside, calm, quiet, neat, but I could feel the storm inside it. My husband pulled into the driveway crooked, wheels nearly on the lawn. He didn't even notice. We rushed toward the front steps, both of us half running, half stumbling, like people suddenly decades younger. Then the front door swung open, and standing there wasn't Marissa, it was Troy. But not the Troy who once strutted around that house like a man inspecting his empire. This Troy looked pale, shaky, and completely undone. His voice quivered as he said my husband's name not in arrogance, but in desperation. And what he told us next was the first piece of truth that finally made everything click into place. Troy stood in the doorway like a man who'd forgotten how to hold up his own spine. His hands were shaking, his face blotchy, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been grabbing at it in panic. For the first time since he entered our family, he looked small. She locked herself in the bedroom, he said, voice cracking. She won't talk to me. She won't even look at me. And the kids, she told them to stay with her. I didn't know what to do. My husband brushed past him without waiting for details, partly because he was worried, partly because he doesn't walk well when he's angry, and partly because he nearly tripped over their decorative shoe rack. Who puts this thing right by the door? He barked, grabbing the wall for balance. I helped steady him while he grumbled about modern furniture being designed by sadists. Troy followed us inside, rubbing the back of his neck like he was bracing for impact. She said she shouldn't have listened to me, he whispered. She said she hurt you both. And she's ashamed. Ashamed. My daughter. Those words cut deeper than anything Troy could ever admit, but I could feel something else in the air too, a deeper fracture, something that hadn't been caused solely by the ultimatum. My mother's instinct prickled. Troy, I said quietly, what aren't you telling us? He opened his mouth, then closed it, looked down, looked away. My husband stopped walking. He turned slowly, like a man who already suspects the answer but needs to hear it spoken. Son, he said, voice low, what happened? And just when Troy took a breath to answer, the upstairs hallway erupted with the sound of a door creaking open. We all froze. Small footsteps padded down the stairs low, hesitant, the kind that carry the weight of a secret a child doesn't know how to hold. Our grandson appeared on the landing, clutching his stuffed dinosaur like a shield. His eyes were red, but dry now, determined in that brave little boy way that always breaks your heart. He looked at Troy first, then at Yuz, and walked straight toward my husband. He tugged on my husband's sleeve. Grandpa, he whispered, Mommy said she lied. About something big, and Dad said she had to fix it. And then they argued, really loud. The house seemed to inhale around us. My husband knelt down, ignoring the protest of his knees. What did she lie about, buddy? The boy swallowed hard, pressing the dinosaur to his chest. She said the ultimatum wasn't Dad's idea. He blinked up at us, eyes wide and shining. She said she was the one who wanted you gone. A silence hit the room so heavy it felt like the walls leaned in to hear it. And behind that truth, I felt another one gathering, darker, deeper, waiting to break open. Because my daughter had always held herself together. For her to unravel now meant something inside that house had finally snapped beyond repair. For a long moment, none of us moved. My grandson's confession hung in the air like a cracked mirror, reflecting every mistake, every unspoken fear, every quiet fracture we'd all stepped over for years. I felt my heart twist, not in anger, not even in betrayal, but in a deep, aching sadness only a mother can understand. My daughter hadn't just pushed us out. She had lied about why. She had chosen pride over truth, and now the weight of it was crushing her. I rose slowly, squeezed my grandson's shoulder, and handed him gently to my husband. He held the boy close, murmuring something soft, something only grandfathers can say, the kind that builds a safe place out of thin air. Then I turned toward the stairs. "Stay with them," I whispered to my husband. He nodded, eyes solemn, protective. Upstairs, the door to Marissa's room was cracked open just an inch. The same door she used to slam during teenage tantrums. The same door she once taped drawings to for Mother's Day. I pushed it open quietly. She sat on the floor beside the bed, knees pulled to her chest, hair messy, mascara smudged. When she lifted her head and saw me, her face crumpled instantly. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking apart, "I messed everything up." I crossed the room and sat beside her. My bones protested, but a mother never lets pain sit between her and her child. She leaned into me, shaking, and I wrapped my arms around her head the way I used to when she was 5 and afraid of the dark. "Tell me," I said softly. I thought if you two left, Troy and I would have more space, less judgment, fewer arguments. I thought I was fixing things." She sniffed, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "But it wasn't him who wanted you gone. It was me. I was overwhelmed. I was embarrassed. I felt like I was failing at everything, and instead of admitting it, I blamed you." Her shoulders shook harder. "And now everything's falling apart. He's angry. The kids are scared. And I don't know how to make any of it right." I took her chin gently and made her look at me. "Sweetheart, the only thing worse than making a mistake is pretending you didn't. And you're done pretending. Look at you. You're telling the truth now. That's where healing starts." She buried her face in my shoulder again. "Do you think Dad will forgive me?" I smiled, brushing her hair back. "Your father is outside wearing socks that look like they lost a bar fight. He will absolutely forgive you." Her laugh came out like a hiccup, sad but real, and that tiny sound told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't lost herself. She'd just gotten tangled. We came downstairs together. My husband stood in the living room holding our grandson, our granddaughter clinging to his leg. His eyebrows were still furrowed, but when he saw Marissa, something softened in him. A father's love doesn't disappear, it just hides behind worry. She walked to him slowly, like approaching a fragile statue. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For all of it, for lying, for pushing you out, for hurting you and Mom." My husband looked at her for one long, steady moment. Then he opened his free arm, and she collapsed into it, sobbing into his chest. His chin trembled just once, but he held her tightly, the way only a man who's weathered storms can hold another soul. Troy stood off to the side, watching, guilt written across his face. Eventually, he stepped toward us. "I'm sorry, too," he said quietly. "I should have told you everything earlier. I should have been better." My husband cleared his throat. "Well, at least now we know which of us is responsible for the spice cabinet disaster." The kids laughed. Even Troy smiled sheepishly. And just like that, the air shifted, not magically, not perfectly, but genuinely. We didn't move back in that day. We didn't pretend everything was fixed. But we stayed for dinner. We talked. We listened. We rebuilt the first stones of something new. As we walked out later that evening, my husband squeezed my hand and whispered, "We didn't break, you know. They did. And now they're asking us how to mend." I nodded. "And we will, because that's what family does." We stepped into the cool night air, the porch light flickering gently above us. For the first time in weeks, my heart felt steady. The house behind us wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a place beginning again because the old ones hadn't given up, because we stood our ground with dignity, because we walked away when pushed and returned when needed. We didn't lose. We endured. And in the end, we won back everything that mattered.